My name is Chris Jarrett, and my passage comes from Dickens Bleak House, chapter 12. In this passage, Lady Dedlock and Mr. Tulkinghorn talk for the first time. This is significant to the plot because Tulkinghorn is implying that he knows Lady Dedlock's connection with the story he tells her. As they turn toward the hall door, Lady Dedlock addresses Mr. Tulkinghorn for the first time. "You sent me a message respecting the person whose writing I happened to inquire about. It was like you to remember the circumstance. I had quite forgotten. Your message reminded me of it again. I can't imagine what association I had with a hand like that, but I surely had some." "You had some?" Mr. Tulkinghorn repeats. "Oh, yes," returns my lady carelessly. "I think I must have had some. Did he really take all that trouble to find out the writer of the actual thing? What is it, affidavit?" "Yes. How very odd." "Yes," he says. "I inquired about the man and found him. And what is very strange, I found him not to be any out-of-the-way person, I am afraid," Lady Dedlock languidly anticipates. "I found him dead." "Oh, dear me," remonstrates Sir Leicester, not so much shocked by the fact as by the fact of the fact being mentioned. "I was directed to his lodging, a miserable, poverty-stricken place, and I found him dead." "You will excuse me, Mr. Tulkinghorn," observed Sir Leicester. "I think the less said. Pray, Sir Leicester, let me hear the story out. It is my lady speaking. It is quite a story for twilight. How very shocking. Dead?" Mr. Tulkinghorn reasserts it by another inclination of his head. "Whether by his own hand—" "Upon my honor," cries Sir Leicester. "Really." "Do let me hear the story," says my lady. "Whatever you desire. But, my dear, I must say—" "No, you mustn't say. Go on, Mr. Tulkinghorn." Sir Leicester's gallantry concedes to the point, though he still feels that to bring this sort of squalor among the upper class is really... "I was about to say," resumes the lawyer with undisturbed calmness, "that whether he had died by his own hand or not, it was beyond my power to tell you. Should amend that phrase, however, by saying that he had unquestionably died of his own act, though whether by his own deliberate intention or by mischance can never certainly be known. The coroner's jury found that he had took the poison accidentally." "And what kind of man," my lady asked, "was this deplorable creature?" "Very difficult to say," returns the lawyer, shaking his head. "He had lived so wretchedly and so neglected, with his gypsy color and his wild black hair and beard, that I should have considered him the commonest of the common. The surgeon had a notion that he had once been something better, both in appearance and condition." "What did they call the wretched being?" "They called him what he had called himself, but no one knew his name." "Not even anyone who had attended on him?" "No one had attended on him. He was found dead. In fact, I found him." "Without any clue to anything more?" "Without any. There was," says the lawyer meditatively, "an old portmanteau, but there were no papers." During the utterance of every word of this short dialogue, Lady Dedlock and Mr. Tulkinghorn, without any alteration in their customary deportment, have looked very steadily at one another, as was natural, perhaps, in the discussion of so unusual a subject. Sir Leicester has looked at the fire with the general expression of the deadlock in the staircase. The story being told, he renews his stately protest, saying that as it is quite clear that no association in my lady's mind can possibly be traceable to this poor wretch, unless he was a begging letter writer, he trusts to hear no more about the subject so far removed from my lady's station. "Certainly a collection of horrors," says my lady, gathering up her mantles and furs, "but they interest one for the moment. Have the kindness, Mr. Tulkinghorn, to open the door for me." They appear to take as little note of one another as any two people, enclosed within the same walls, could. But whether each ever more watches and suspects the other, ever more mistrustful of some great reservation, whether each is ever more prepared at all points for the other, and never to be taken unawares, what each would give to know how much the other knows, all is hidden, for the time, in their own hearts.